We are now having Schalk Venter, who is going to be talking about mental illness and vulnerability in tech. Schalk is a software engineer and a product design consultant working on various personal, commercial, and open source projects. He usually finds himself at the intersection of interaction, design, and engineering, having done contract work for a whole heap of people, including the Treasury, the Google Foundation, Sea Monster Entertainment, whoever they may be, and various others. He has lectured in a senior capacity at the Academy of Digital Arts, Codex, Open Window, and the University of Pretoria, and he co-created the Interaction Design degree at the Cape Town Creative Academy. He has also co-founded Front-End Development South Africa, although I think you said that had a new name.
Yeah, I knew now.
And the South African Product Design, ZAPD. And I must apologize to him. I made a joke at the end of Sheena's session that you can tell the academics because they use the word orthogonal. Schalk tells me he learned the word 10 minutes ago in conversation with Sheena. So, in that case, thank you, Schalk.
Yeah, so the story behind that is like literally we were having discussion and I was like, flip man, wat's die Engels vir doodreg? And she's like, what's talking about? Okay. I literally learned that 10 minutes ago, so, all right. Cool, so, geez, all right, let's do this. So, I want to touch on a couple of things. Firstly, who am I? Kind of just sharing a moment of vulnerability, kind of just setting a bit of the stage for what we're about to talk about. I guess I just had one where I faced up to everyone that I don't know the word orthogonal really. And then I want to talk about the stigma around mental health and mental illness and so forth, and the tech industry at large and its relation to mental health. Spoiler, it's not great. And I really want to keep some time for discussion afterwards because I do think like that's where the most useful stuff happens around this type of topic. So just a couple of disclaimers. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. In general, this is not advice regardless whether it's medical or anything else. I'm just a guy who's just trying to make sense of kind of where he's finding himself and where he's going and making sense of like all the forces around me and where I find myself and so forth. Another thing as well is if you are here and you're looking for some nice summaries and everything's tied up real nice at the end and we have an answer, I have some bad news for you. This type of thing, there's just so much to unpack. Like you start talking about one thing and it's like, yeah, but all this other stuff and so forth. And usually it's just like, okay, time's up. We need to stop now. I've actually like did a lot of interviews and podcasts and stuff around this as well. And usually it's like at the 3-hour mark and then it's like, yeah, we probably need to end now. Like there's no way to tie this up nicely. So I'm going to try and squeeze in as much as possible. So I might go a bit fast, but yeah, let's see how it goes. All right, okay. So, firstly, who am I? So that was an amazing intro. I would love to meet that guy. Yeah, I feel a bit pretentious for painting that myself, I guess. Like hearing someone read it back to me, I'm like, yo, that guy sounds pretentious. But yeah, so I do a lot of contract work. I did some work for National Treasury, Google Foundation, all across the place. I'm very fortunate insofar that I get exposed to a lot of different things, a lot of different projects and stuff. Worked very long in kind of in the world of civic technology, which is actually another moment of vulnerability. I'm not actually a Python developer. I mostly do TypeScript, do a lot of functional languages like Haskell and so forth. Don't really do Python, but I somehow end up hanging out with a lot of Python people, and it's because I was in civic technology very long. So like, and over there, like the language of choice is Python because you do a lot of data stuff and so forth. Very involved in the community stuff. One of the admins on ZA Tech, also one of the co-founders of FedSA. And I think also, if it wasn't clear, very much also involved in teaching and training and stuff, which is kind of why Sheena and I have so much to talk about. And I actually don't have a formal background in tech, and I guess this is also where the teaching and stuff come in. I was actually a visual artist until I realized I need to buy groceries. And then I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, also very involved in open source, although not so much of that nowadays. And the reason for that is because of this. So I have 2 daughters, live in the northern suburbs. If the what is the English for Loodrecht didn't give that away. But yeah, like it's very hard nowadays telling my wife that no, I'm going to work late tonight, and it's actually I'm not even getting paid for it. It's for internet points. So yeah, very much involved in kind of like the topic I'm about to speak about. So I run a kind of a podcast that's a bit intermittent with a very good friend of mine, Schalk, also called Schalk. And yeah, you can just go to mhit.org.za and we just talk to people in tech, talk about their experiences, some South African people, some international people. I'm on Cipralex, I'm on Venlaw. This medicine has saved my life, like no jokes. And yeah, just trying to survive. I'm all over the place. You can very easily find me. Schalk is not that common of a name in the world of tech, so I often make the joke that if this was like a game range conference or a farming expo, it would be a different story. But just search Schalk JavaScript or tech or whatever. Right. So let's get into this. Enough about me. So the first time I've done this talk a couple of times, and the first time, very interestingly, I was super stressed, and because the first time you share about this stuff, it's really hard, and the more you talk about it, it gets easier. So the first time I was really stressed, and then in the middle of my talk, the power went off and it was load shedding, and they couldn't get the stuff up. So I did the first half of it the very first time, and that was very unnerving. But it was also a good opportunity for me to test my own mental resilience and be like, it's all right, it's okay. But yeah, so the first time I did this, I asked for a bit of advice. Good friend of mine said, it's probably worth talking about my own feelings and then opening up about kind of my own anxieties and stress about sharing about this. And this personal vulnerability is a difficult thing, but I think it's almost like it's a bit of a eating your own dog food in terms of if I'm saying we need to really have an open discussion about mental health and mental illness and those things. And I'm just not sharing my own journey, I think, and sharing the parts that I wish wasn't real, then that's not really great. So yeah, I mentioned eating the dog food, which is, kind of just basically putting into practice or using one's own product or what one advocates for. So yeah, just to kind of get started about my own journey. And this is really hard to share, even still now, because it's so far removed from who I am today, and it's almost like I'm almost embarrassed about it. It's almost there's a part of me that's like, what was I even thinking, And I think this is what makes it hard as well, is these type of stories are usually embarrassing, and it's not romanticized like you see on the TV of the tortured artist or whatever. It's you kind of cringe a bit when you tell it. But yeah, so this was very, very long ago in the prehistoric time before COVID. That was 2014. And this was me, much younger me. My daughter looks at photos of me in my 20s and whatever, and she's like, "Dis toe papa 'n kind was." Yeah. So something happened. So I've been struggling with mental health on and off, and I did the whole thing where it's I was very opposed to medication and whatever, and I was like, I should just get a good diet, I should just sleep well, exercise a lot and whatever. So I had these bouts where, I think I was naive enough where it was okay, I'm going through a tough time, but now I'm feeling much better and I'm cured, and I finally overcame this mental health thing. And so this was the start of another episode. For some reason, so one of my friends came to visit from overseas. This is 2014, and she took these photos and just put it on Facebook. People were still using Facebook back then. This is how far back this is. And I just looked at the photo and I just got the sense my face is skew, and I just couldn't shake the feeling. And it's so embarrassing to talk about, and it's so hard to explain. And I often tell people it's like when you bungee jump, it has no bearing whether you actually think you're going to die or not. And a lot of obsessive and compulsive things and so forth, it's not that you actually believe it. It's just you can't stop feeling this way, even if you don't cognitively believe it. In the same way, you have this emotional response when you're about to bungee jump, even though you're I know I'm not going to die. But so around the time, this is kind of like a post that I made on Reddit. Well, I think I replied to someone who said they have like body dysmorphic stuff and so forth. And I said, like I've been developing the same type of thoughts regarding my facial feature structure for the first time at the age of 27. I woke up one morning, realized that my smile is skew. One corner of my mouth doesn't lift up when I smile. I fell into suicidal depression. Like I literally didn't want to live anymore, which to me seems so bizarre now thinking back about this. And I literally couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just became obsessed with this thing. And I was so convinced that people were uncomfortable in my presence just to how distorted my face was. And I think it's so hard, and I haven't seen a psychologist or anything up until this point, and it's so hard making sense of all this stuff. Especially, my parents came from an era where you just like you laughed at this. You're like, what the fuck's this guy's problem? Sorry, am I allowed to swear? So I actually went to a plastic surgeon. Like this is how severely I believe this, and he's basically said that. In short, he told me like I don't need a plastic surgeon. I need a psychologist. Yeah, and I'm not going to bore this stuff, but yeah, effectively, I just couldn't help obsessing about it. Even as I was typing this, I was acknowledging that this is insane and like this doesn't make any sense, but I just can't stop doing this. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the rest of it. The slides are online if you want to read the entire thing. But effectively, it's just me kind of expressing this thing around like I know this probably isn't true, but like I don't know how to stop feeling this way. And years later, you would realize, okay, there's probably like some OCD or something going on there. And I think I got on the Zytomil, and that just completely cleared that up. Yeah. And yeah, so started going to a psychologist for the first time, unable to say whether I'm actually making progress. According to the psychologist, it's quite common for people with pre-existing social anxiety, inclination towards low self-worth to develop crippling obsessions about their appearance. I don't know how applicable this is to you, but going from I'm unattractive to I want to kill myself is maybe not a normal like cascade of thoughts. All right, and indicative of something deeper that needs to be addressed. So as I was going through this, like I was literally typing this stuff out and like I was cognitively reasoning it out and saying like how this is insane, but I still couldn't help feeling this way. So then the question is, why do I tell you guys this? Don't get me wrong, I'm as much of a fan of just sharing my deepest, darkest secrets with a room full of people as anyone else. And if it wasn't clear, like I'm obviously visibly uncomfortable telling this story. I'm like fidgety and struggling over my words because it sucks and I don't want to talk about it and I just want to move on and I want to forget about it. But I do think there's something to be said for having gone through that experience, maybe gives me a bit of empathy and perspective that I wouldn't have had if I just came, because I'm in a very fortunate position now in terms of my career and so forth, and being able to choose how I spend my time in terms of teaching and being involved in community stuff and so forth. And if I just started out like straight into that, there's maybe a perspective that I wouldn't have had, and I wouldn't maybe have been able to advocate like for some of the stuff I'm going to advocate for now. And the reason why I want to talk about this is that I do think there is a massive problem around mental health at the moment. I think like it's in tech specifically, I think it's at catastrophic levels. Like statistically, if you look at any data, like it is a very, very bleak picture. So I think as a first step, maybe you should just talk about it openly. And so the first time I did this talk, I actually got a message from someone who I worked with very closely who said, like, I never knew you even struggled with this stuff. Like, it's wow, man. And, and that wasn't a unique experience. So I'm going to be referencing this quite a lot. So there's an organization called OSME, which is open sourcing mental illness. Open sourcing mental illness. So they do lots of surveys and stuff around mental health and mental illness and tech and so forth. And in their one survey, they basically, the question was effectively, are you more comfortable sharing physical or mental health with your coworkers? And no surprises, physical is like just disproportionately dominating. some people say, they don't really have a preference, and like this little slither down here is more comfortable talking about mental problems than physical problems. And this is a phenomenal book, and it very much resonates for me with kind of what Andrew Solomon said. Like he talks about there's so much pain in the world. Most of these people keep their secret rolling through agonizing lives in invisible wheelchairs dressed in invisible bodycasts. And I think that really resonates with me, and it really kind of puts a bit of a perspective on this bar chart over here. And I do think, so I told my own story. I kind of gave a bit of an individual perspective here, but I do think there's a collective cost. And even if you're like, man, I am so well integrated, I'm living my best life, I have this inner peace and zen inside me. Sorry to hear about your shit. Like, I think even then, like, it's worthwhile for you to be part of the conversation, because I do think there's a larger cost involved here. And this is mostly what I want to be talking about, is why even people that don't deal with these things need to really advocate for these conversations to happen, even just for purely selfish reasons, because there are externalities. I think one of the good examples is you guys might know about this guy. He was very involved in the Python world as well. Unfortunately committed suicide. So he wrote a blog post in 2007 saying, I have a lot of illnesses. I don't talk about it much for a variety of reasons. I feel ashamed to have an illness. It sounds absurd, but there's still an enormous stigma around being sick. Okay? And this is a guy who was like a very big public figure who was advocating for a lot of stuff, got involved in the political arena around like tech and the role tech plays in society. And he kind of skirted around his own mental like issues and so forth. So, if he couldn't really feel free to talk about it openly, what hope is there for like the rest of us? I like this take on it, which is basically, a lot of people blame kind of the US attorney and their actions for his suicide, but, and it's justified, but I think there's also a missed opportunity there if we don't really talk about kind of his own mental struggles and the role that played, without absolving kind of the reality of the situation. But, there's a lot of people that get unfairly prosecuted that don't commit suicide, So, and I think like when I talk about collective cost, just thinking about like how young he still was and what he could have still contributed to the world of development and so forth if he didn't take his own life, like that's the cost that all of us share. Like there's a lot of stuff that could have come out of his career that we don't have now because he didn't feel free to talk about like his own mental struggles. And once again, Noonday Demon, depressed people cannot lead a revolution because depressed people can barely manage to get out of bed and put on their shoes and socks. And I think this is kind of, there's a couple of things that I think where we're failing and why this problem is getting so bad. But I also think a big part of it is that we are leaving it up to the people who are suffering from the stuff to advocate for change. And it's very hard to advocate for systematic change when you can barely eat breakfast. And you can barely like wake up 10 minutes without crawling back into your bed. So then the question is, what do we do? Yeah. I don't know, and which is what makes it so hard to talk about this. Sometimes you get really discouraged. You just see what's happening in the tech industry. You just see people getting sidelined because, of their mental health situation, or because they're going through a tough time, or they speak openly about they maybe have a bipolar depression or whatever, and you just see them kind of getting worked out, or and how stigmatized it is. And also then there's the other side, like you can't reasonably expect the employer to just be like, okay, there's one candidate who has more risk than the other one, and for whatever reason, I'm going to choose the one that comes with more risk. So it's just this big mess, and like I don't really even know what to do about it. But I think at the very best, we should even just start a conversation about it. I really like this. This is from a book called Shipstar, which is that remember people break down to not just machinery. And I think there are some, I mentioned, I think there's a collective cost that we need to talk about beyond just, hey, you're going through a tough time, I feel for you and I want to make things better for you. I think our current approach isn't working for even neurotypical people. Because no surprises, do you believe your productivity is affected by your mental health? Okay? I don't know, this seems like a pretty good case for me to actually care about your employees' mental health, even if you're just like a cutthroat capitalist who's just like, where are my profits at, you know? So, and just like thinking about this idea of people breaking down, if you think about how much resources we spend into keeping our systems like up and preventing our systems from breaking down and falling over and whatever, and how disproportionate amount of those same resources we actually ensure that the guy who's actually, you know, SSHing into the server or whatever doesn't just implode and run away one day and no one knows where he is and he's not showing up for work or whatever. And that has happened. I've been in situations where people they have a mental breakdown or they just don't show up for meetings anymore or whatever. And across the entire organization, that's disastrous. Once again, just thinking about this from a purely like cold-hearted empirical standpoint, like that's something that you'd probably want to avoid, and actually doesn't take that much work to actually put things in place to prevent that from from people in your organization just like crashing and just disappearing, or just quitting their job on the spot because they can't take it anymore. And this is the thing, and sometimes it's just as easy as just making an environment where people can speak about this. That requires like nothing. It's like basically just a cultural changes are huge. Don't let me say like, oh, it requires nothing. Changing culture is massive. But there's no like, you know, like in terms of your actual bottom line or like having to spend significant resources in doing that, a lot of this can be done in very like incremental, like piecemeal fashions. And so this is the part that's very damning is, you know, there's a couple of surveys. I think this one is maybe the one with the biggest selection of people that they interviewed. You know, they spoke about they spoke to 12,000 people in the tech industry, and half of the respondents, 57%, basically replied. They asked like, you know, are you currently suffering from job burnout? 57% replied yes. And indeed, okay, that means that the majority of people in tech currently suffer from burnout. That means if we were to take a random person in this room, pluck them out, ask them, are you suffering from burnout right now? And they say no, they are the exception. They're not the rule. You know, just take a random person. If this is a tech industry, you're more likely to pick someone who's currently experiencing burnout than not. And I personally think this is like, a lot of it can be put on failures of processes. Because this, you know, this is pretty damning as well. This is also from OSME, is they ask, you know, have you observed or experienced, keyword here, observed. So this is like just, as an outsider, a supportive or well-handled response to a mental health issue. Look at that. Maybe not sure. If you're not sure if it was well handled, chances are it wasn't well handled. Okay? So only here we start getting into the more positive side of things. Like, that's insane, guys. And I do think for me, you know, now we're getting into anecdotal experience. Like, this has been my anecdotal experience. I've been very fortunate that I've been involved with a lot of companies. I've been involved in various places in the hierarchy, you know. As a contractor, sometimes I'm the team lead, sometimes I'm the most junior person on the team, sometimes I'm doing managerial stuff, sometimes I'm actually in there in the code, writing the code, fixing bugs. And for me, anecdotally, what I've found is that I think a lot of this comes from, like, when these things arise, we bolt on solutions to address it. Not to say that these aren't, like, useful. I guess it's better than anything. This is supposed to be a wheelchair ramp, for those that are wondering. You know, like, sure, maybe you give your employees, like, an hour, you sponsor them an hour of, I don't know, better help or whatever, or you have like, I don't know, whatever. But like a lot of times it's just like as an afterthought. So it's like, cool, we have our way that we run our business and we're going to pluck on some solution to just pizza parties or whatever, you know, address people's mental health. And so this actually comes from another set of slides that I do. I kind of talk quite a lot about web accessibility. So kind of there's this whole idea in web accessibility in terms of if you bolt on solutions after you've built the thing, then you make it not only worse for people who need it, but also other people who don't need it. So, you know, then everyone suffers. And I think this is the case here as well, because now what happens is if you just bolt on solutions afterwards, so let's say this guy is having a mental health crisis, and, we're talking within the realm of depression and those things, but maybe just his wife died, or, or he's going through a divorce or whatever. Now you have to figure out, how do we deal with this? We don't actually even have processes. Just bolt something on. And then everyone else gets negatively affected because now someone else has to pick up that work. And what now? This work needs to be done, and we don't have processes to deal with this, and everyone just loses at the end. And this is where I kind of look a lot to kind of the way that a lot of advocates for accessibility talk about this. And accessibility is not approached as a last-minute checklist, additions that are piled onto the product, a set of features that are designed. It's supposed to be a set of features that are designed in place from the start. It's often considered only at the end of the development process. Resolving accessibility issues on a finished product often yields unsatisfying results. This last part didn't highlight, but for the designer and the user, both. So everyone loses at the end. Okay, but so I'm superimposing kind of a lot of the thinking in terms of accessibility onto mental health and so forth. And so here's a very good example. We are one of the very unfortunate people that we have our dishwasher in our living room because I live in a small house with 2 kids. And so when my wife and I want to watch TV, sometimes we need to decide whether we want to actually be able to hear what's going on the TV, or we want to have dirty dishes tomorrow. We can't have both. So in a case like that, subtitles are amazing. Subtitles weren't even invented for me, they're solving someone else's problem, but you have this downstream effect where everyone benefits, okay? And the same here, so this is me and my daughter in the pram, and anyone who has kids or has a pram, look at this terrain here, buddy. You know what I'm talking about. That's like an hour's gym effort right there. But this is also one of those things where I don't have a wheelchair, but I benefit downstream from all the adjustments that are made for wheelchairs. That little thing in the sidewalk where it kind of has this little thing with a grip, those little round circles. That's amazing to have something like that. I don't have to go every time I go for a walk. So this is where even people downstream benefit from this. And I think there's something to be said here where, maybe people like me, people who have go through very severe mental health episodes and stuff, can provide a way to stress test systems and processes. Because if there's a way to accommodate someone like me, so once again, let's get real here. I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about people that are in good faith. They want to contribute, they want to actually be valuable to the team, but there's some stuff that they struggle with that is beyond their control, and they try and work around that and provide value despite that. I'm not talking about people who are just because it's very easy for people to blame, to just use that as an excuse to be not show up for work or whatever. I'm talking about people that take accountability for it and who are going through treatment and so forth. But you can't ever get rid of it completely. And here's some examples, accessibility-wise, I love some of these comments. This is from the subreddit. There's an entire subreddit that's accessibility fails, where it's you have to press the button up there to open the door for the wheelchair. And here's an example where they have braille, but they put plexiglass over it. So, and it's a lot of times processes and things are designed without, this is the worst clicker. Sometimes processes and things are designed not intentionally to be stupid or to be cumbersome or obstructive. People just don't know better. And I think by having discussions about mental health and, it's a spectrum, even if it's just hey, I just don't handle stress very well, or sometimes it's hey, I have this massive illness and sometimes I can barely function. It's a spectrum. And I think just having open discussions about that, we can maybe say things maybe it doesn't cost you anything to not put that 3 meters up in the air. It's just some of it is just we don't build our processes well because no one's speaking about what they need. And I think it's also important to talk about resilience as a quality. I think this is one of the big things in accessibility as well. There's no threshold where your product's not accessible and now all of a sudden it's accessible. Like, it's a threshold, like, and you kind of try and move a bit up that threshold as far as you can. It's a quality, and even physical and cognitive ability occurs along a spectrum. As I mentioned, sometimes it's not even bodily but circumstantial. I spoke about the pram, I spoke about the subtitles. And I think this is the part that's important as well, is that, and this is from, I don't know, like, if my old teacher were to see me now using Wikipedia as a primary source. But also, those are the same people who, like, believe everything they read on Facebook. So I don't know. Like, you shouldn't use Wikipedia as a source. Did you know they're eating dogs and cats? But anyway. So evidence suggests that, burnout is, this is way harder than orthogonal on, who can pronounce that word? Get a load of that wise ass. Clinically and nosological, similar to depression. So basically, patients, no diagnostically significant differences were found between people that had severe burnout and people who were struggling from clinical depression. So that means, like, diagnostically, it's impossible to tell if someone is suffering from burnout or whether they have clinical depression. So, like, I think there's a lot of things that benefit people that struggle with this more as a chronic thing, that would also benefit people who are just like, I'm overwhelmed at the moment, I just took on too many projects, I don't feel like I can come into work tomorrow. So, there's like, it's the same thing of like downstream, by like making provision for like the variety of people in terms of the spectrum of mental health. You also downstream provide a lot of benefits for just regular people having tough times. Cool. So I told you, like, there's not going to be a nice summary and it's like, point 1, point 2, point 3, like, my hope is just that, like, somehow there's some primitives or atomic parts here that I can just share that some other people can latch onto and continue some type of conversation. But I would be amiss if I didn't just talk about some possible resources that have been helpful for me in the past. SADAG, they have the worst website ever. I've been wanting to just help them get a new website like since forever, but it's just like, I have just so much other things going on at the moment. But don't be put off by their website. Like, they do amazing work. So it's South African. There you go. What he said. OSME, I spoke about OSME, osmehelp.org. They have really cool stuff. They have stuff that's kind of aimed at managers as well. So, as a manager, like, what are some steps and things that you can take? Unfortunately, it's very much obviously geared to the US. I would love to one day compile something like this for South Africa specifically. Also around kind of like, in terms of your legal rights and legal implications and like what are your guarantees in terms of the Constitution and so forth. Dorkiest name ever. But I found so many good like psychologists or therapists on Therapist Directory. Granted, now I have big enough tech salary to be able to afford that. When I was still in the visual arts, obviously, like, the idea of paying someone 1,000 Rand for one session was just like, I'm going to be even more depressed after that. But like, I think there are avenues as well. So at that time, I contacted Grote Skuur, and they actually have a lot of like postgrad students and stuff who need to do X amount of like practical hours in order to graduate, and they can just set you up with one of those. And I had an amazing therapist, and she's now like really like notable, and she actually appears on TV and whatever. But like, I was just her practical case when she was studying. So it might be worth just like getting in touch with like some of these like university hospitals and so forth. Also, the other thing is support groups. So SADAG. So support groups are amazing, man. I wish people would attend more support groups. I used to attend one nearby here at Akiso when I was still like living in this area. And I got in touch with. But so one thing though is you have to phone them, and then they put you in touch with someone, just so that random people don't just get access to the info. So you just need to. There's a bit of built-in friction that you just need to go for. But like support groups are amazing. There's other resources like Crisis Text Line and Seven Cups. You might have heard about. I've not had that much great experience with these. And I think maybe the active listening thing is just not for me, because it almost feels like now someone's just affirming that what I'm feeling is right, like because they're acknowledging it. And I was like, no. But maybe it works for someone else. This is really great. So Paul Gilmartin, his podcast helped me a ton. He's a comedian, suffers with like a lot of really like intense mental health stuff. Very entertaining. Can be a bit vulgar sometimes, but I think that comes with the territory of being a comedian. So just heads up there. But like, man, like it's so. I think I've heard someone refer to it as perversely honest discussions about mental illness, which is amazing. Then if you're on ZA Tech, I don't know what to say about ZA Tech, but if you're on ZA Tech, there is a mental health channel there. Where I've met some people as well, formed some friendships. Also, if you want to get the slides, just go slides.com/Schalk. I saw you're using slides.com as well. Not that little blue arrow, like see, it's there at the bottom. Oh, it's built on Reveal, so it's a SaaS product built on Reveal. That's why. Oh yeah. I'm too lazy. And then I mentioned mentalhealthintech.org.za. Where we talk about, we talk to some people in South Africa and so forth. We recently spoke to Joff from CAE. It's not really the wheelhouse of the Python guys, but Smashing Magazine, CSS Tricks. So there's some stuff that went down there in terms of his firing and whatever, and he opened up about that and so forth, which was really great. And yeah, that's about it. I don't know if there's enough time for questions. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Is there?
Well, thanks, Scott. Well, as it is, we're going into tea, so yes, there is time for questions. If we indulge ourselves for a few minutes of
you have
cutting
to choose
into the tea.
Between food and food for thought. Hey, that was amazing. Oh.
A little shot. You made the joke similar. I was going to say, just because I can say etiological doesn't mean I know what it means. I mean,
we don't even know if that's the correct pronunciation. No one's challenging you.
I've got away with that for years. Do we have any comments, questions for Schalk?
Thank you. Great talk. Just a quick question on, you brought up the question of the survey on, do you feel like you are currently at burnout or have a mental health issue? My first, if I was answering that question, my first thought would have been, how do I define this? How do I know if I'm actually at burnout?
Sorry, can you speak up just a little bit, or can you guys just...
I think the mic was...
Oh, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, see. So the question on if you are experiencing burnout or a mental health issue, my first question for myself would have been, how do I define that? How do I know if I am at burnout? Do you have, what do you think are the basic markers for burnout and something that should be at least standardized for management or to know about, okay, are my employees at a certain point of burnout? How do they identify it? How do I know if they are?
Yes. So as far as I know, there are statistical what's the word that you use? But criteria, indicators. I wanted to say trackers, indicators. But I don't also always know whether that formulation of burnout kind of maybe aligns with how we in popular culture talk about burnout. I don't know. It's obviously I think in the survey itself as well is pretty subjective, so it doesn't really matter what the official definition is. But I think at the very least, if you self-diagnose yourself as burnt out, you're probably indicating that more things are going wrong than are going right for you mentally at this point. I don't think you would say I'm burnt out, but all in all, there's more things going for me on the positive side than on the negative side. So, yeah, in terms of there is like the problem is anything where you kind of subjectively self-diagnose. It's very hard to really get an official empirical definition of okay, now you count as burnt out, now you don't. Yeah. Sorry, that's the best I can give. Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
Thank you for your talk. So I think more of a comment and something that I've observed. So while I was studying, right, we had this thing called the buddy system. So what we would do is we would monitor each other. And what I've realized while I was doing that is actually for me, while I was working, I was carrying my burnout almost like a badge of honor. I was overworking myself. And it wasn't for my body questioning me, how did I sleep? What am I thinking? I don't think it would have hit me or made me consider that I am burnt out or I'm approaching a burnout. And I think that is something that could be a good thing to be implemented is providing that buddy system at work with each other. You don't have to talk your inner personal details, but just asking your fellow colleague, like, how did you sleep last night? What is your thoughts? That could help in limiting somebody from hitting that breaking point of complete burnout or just having a complete mental breakdown.
Yeah, I also think there's a bit of a cultural change that needs to happen. I think there's a lot of things that we celebrate that are pretty toxic, and and we just normalize. Oh, there goes. Is that my battery that just went? Oh, was it you?
Oh no, I'm sorry.
It's all right. So yeah, like I think, and like this, I find that you can actually do the most good to perceptions around these things at a student level. I think a lot of our ideas around what the tech industry demands of us are cemented when we are students. Like, and it's weird that when I was, and which is why I really like Sheena's thing, because it was more about the human and, thinking about how you mold their perception of what they're doing and get them excited about it. And unfortunately, it sucks that that's the exception. If you have a teacher like that or a lecturer like that, you'd be like, wow, man, I'm so lucky. And it sucks because, like, I think widespread across academia, there's almost like a disdain for students and be like, yeah, they just need to suck it up. They need to learn the real world, and the real world's not going to go easy on them. If you need to pull an all-nighter tonight, suck it up. That's part. You need to push yourself. You need to, like, and I think a lot of that starts there. Like, and we perpetuate that because we're just like, that's just how I think we had a conversation actually this morning, Sean, where we spoke about that. And I said, like, one of the biggest tragedies for me is I had a very rough start when I started in the tech industry. And I wish that sooner in my career I knew that it doesn't have to be this way. I think when I just started out, like, same thing. I just, like, every third month I just had to do an all-nighter just because of some deadlines that I had no control over. And I just was just like, tech industry is demanding, like you need to be the best, and you need to be strong, and you need to. And I wasn't like, this sucks, and it doesn't have to be this way. And I just thought, like, if I just go to another company, this is just how it's going to be. And I think if I can give any advice to anyone or anyone who's just a junior or whatever, it doesn't need to suck. Period. That's the most powerful thing you can tell a student or a junior. It doesn't need to suck. And in fact, if it actually sucks that much, you're not the problem. You need to get out of there. Yeah.
I've one more question from Sheena, but there's just a couple of comments on the Discord. There's quite a few, so I'm not going to read them all, but I'm just going to note it is worth going to the Discord channel /hash Righthand room, which is where this discussion is happening. There's lots of comments from people who've been watching online, particularly Tondi Cross is pretty much what you said. It's at the student level that it matters.
Yeah.
One note that Jeremy Thurgood made, which I think would be a comment he would make were he in the room, sick leave is useful to take because you can take it for mental illness as well as physical illness. If you need to take a day off to recover from stress, that is allowed.
Yes, but the problem is then some thoughts on that.
It's not that simple. I
Get
realize.
sick and you
No,
spent it all on
exactly.
meds.
It's not that simple. I realize, but it is a point. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm gonna. Sheena had her hand up before yourself.
I would love a.
Go.
Can I override you here? And I would love to get one from Gordon as well.
Okay. So Sheena doesn't want you to. He doesn't want you to.
No. You can split halfies. You can go halfies.
If I'm going to say, let's take Gordon's comment, and then I'd suggest if you want to go to tea, please do. And then, as with Sheena's comment,
optionally listen
you can
to
find the
us.
people outside, or otherwise stay for Sheena's comment.
Yes.
Yeah, and firstly, thank you, Sheena. Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you for the talk, and I think also particularly thank you for your vulnerability. I think you're right that by being honest about what happened to you, it conveys what you're saying. I think that's a bit better. If I'm being a bit honest and being a bit cynical, I think the thread of alienation that you're talking about and the disconnection of the personal from is a very convenient thing when you are setting up systems of control and power.
Yeah.
And I think it, as much as these things sometimes happen by accident, sometimes they are deliberate.
Yes.
So the question I wanted to ask you though is, if you're trying to do something different and you're trying to do something better, what are some cultural practices that you've observed that you think foster? Because I really think it is. I think that point about culture is a very powerful one. What's things that have caught your eye that you think really lead to a better?
Yes. So I also just want to acknowledge what you're saying is that it's hard for me because I've been in situations. I've been on multiple sides. I've been in situations where someone underneath me in a team I was leading had some mental health stuff going on, and you have to shield your team from that. You also have a responsibility to protect your team. So you can't just be, okay, everyone come, let's support this guy, figure out, they have their own deadlines and whatever. So I don't know the answer. Let me just put it this way. A lot of people might listen to me talk and they'd be like, yeah, but you can't just do, there are rules and you need to follow. It's tough. I don't know what the answer is. To your question about what can you proactively do, one thing that I think as a fellow cynic, I do think sometimes it's just the culture that manifests, and it is what it is. Sometimes places just develop a really bad culture, and you just need to get out of there. It's not on you to fix that. It's not your job. And it's fine if they want to be that way, they can be that way. But there are places that are not like that. There are places where they actually care about you. And I think also there's a lot to be said for sometimes business models are built on exploitation. I think we need to acknowledge that as well. I'm very lucky that I work for a couple of clients that have really good business models, and they're not under pressure to exploit people because their business idea is so good and they just make so much money, and they're just cool, if you want to take a day off, we can afford it. So I think a lot of places are built on squeezing your employees for the most you can get out of them with the least cost to you. So I think it's just some places, the incentives are just whack. So I think the cynic in me would say that I don't really know. Some places are beyond saving, and you just need to move on. Then I think I sometimes get this as well. Managers come up to me and they ask me, cool, what can I do as a manager? And I would probably say the bar for good manager is so low that the fact that you're even asking that question means you're right. Don't worry about it. The fact that you even want to be that person for your team, you're one of the good ones. I think I have so many thoughts on just middle management and so forth. But yeah, I don't know. I guess what can you do? It's so specific to a team and the culture and whatever that I don't think there's a universal rule. But I do think just acknowledging that this is a thing is a really big step in the right direction. Yes. Unfortunately, that's the best I can do. Cool.
Well, thank you. Gordon's pretty much said the last thing I was going to say, but I was just going to say thank you, Schalk, for being prepared to be open with us. It was really, really fantastic. Thank you very much.
We'll see if it comes back to bite me. But yeah.